Okay, everyone, I need you to promise you're gonna be normal about this episode. I know this one features some true, uncut, unfettered dwarf taint, but please contain yourself, at least until I get to tell you to subscribe at the end. And please keep your hands and feet inside the video at all times. Dungeon Meshi episode 12 covers chapters 27 and 28 of the manga. Fallen is finally back and the gang get a well-deserved break. But that's not to say that there isn't still some incredible animation that needs to be broken down to an unnecessary level of detail by a hard-shelled creature with dubious credibility. So let's go ahead and do that, and compare it a little bit to the source material along the way. This episode was directed and storyboarded by Chigusa Kiyota. Kiyota took these two separate panels from the manga and reframed them into this one shot with a foreground, midground, and background, which adds a sense of depth and communicates that Laios and Marcille are still the focal point of the scene, even if Senshi and Chilchuk are looking on and commenting. This is an interesting touch. They've taken this panel depicting the enormous amount of meat that would be required to resurrect a corpse this far gone, and in the anime overlaid this distorted, ghostly shadow of Fallen over the bodies of the sheeps. This is a bit of a nitpick, but this shot is a bit janky. The angle of Senshi's helmet doesn't really make sense. It looks like it's been sort of squished 20 degrees to the right of the way that his head is actually facing, and Chilchuk's jacked up hand here would be fine for a single frame, but it's more noticeable when it's shown for a full 5 seconds. Even when faced with the horrifying decision to use forbidden ancient magic to resurrect his mostly digested sister, Laios takes the opportunity to play with dog bones in this scene, which is replicated beat for beat from the manga. And it's nice to see a rare moment where Laios and Marcille's weirdnesses coincidentally sync up. I love the cheerful meal is ready score over the assembled skeletons, a panel which is made even funnier in the manga by the ingredients list, which they don't include in the anime. Here's a detail I haven't noted until now, but as a commenter pointed out in my last video, and is particularly relevant to this episode, Marcille's hairstyle changes with each episode. As she's mentioned, a mage's hair is important to their magical ability, so while attention is never brought to it, with each new challenge the party faces, Marcille styles her hair a little differently. In this case, she starts the episode with the intricate but practical braided updo that had prepared her to search for Fallen's bones. It was elegant, clearly took some effort, but at the same time kept her hair neatly out of the way. Later in the episode, she has a much more laid-back and low-effort ponytail when she has some time to relax, but now with the battle over and an ancient ritual to perform, she lets her hair down for a more primal type vibe. With that in mind, it's really a shame that they decided not to include this panel of her letting down her hair in preparation for the spell, which was easily the most memorable one from this chapter, for me at least. Instead, just cutting straight to the start of the ritual. It marks the scene transition and shows Marcille in a whole new light, exhausted and blood-stained, but determined. There's a newfound darkness in her eyes, and I can just imagine how poignant it could have been if they had given it the same level of attention that they did to this shot from the start of episode 7. That said, her hair really does dominate this next sequence in a way that it didn't in the manga. While much of this episode settles down a bit from the non-stop concentrated animation IV injected directly into my veins that was the previous episode, and goes back to allowing the source material to speak for itself a little more, we've now arrived at what is obviously the standout moment that brings identity to the entire episode, the resurrection scene. It starts off with this cut by episode director Chigusa Kiyota before the scene is handed over to Ichigo Kanno. This added close-up of Chilchuk's ear with detailed light and shadow in the intricate folds draws attention not only to the lighting change, where the characters are now underlit from the glow of the spell as the area fades into darkness, but also the phenomenal audio of this scene. The area fills with the ambience of wind, steam, and boiling blood, while Marcille's unintelligible muttering in some ancient language becomes so echoey and ethereal that it starts to feel like it's not actually coming from her mouth, it just exists as part of the atmosphere around them. If you listen with headphones, you can even notice that there are two separate echoes slightly offset from each other, the left channel first, followed by the right channel about half a second later. This absolutely incredible keyframe / background art was done by Ichigo Kanno, who we talked about extensively last episode, and based on the angular and expressionistic character designs, I'm willing to bet that he also did most of, if not all of the rest of this sequence. These notes indicate that this part should be a cell drawing, while everything up here should be background art, and these lines indicate the framing as the camera tilts downward. There's so much detail in these buildings that mostly just gets reduced to silhouette the farther away it gets, a necessity for the moody lighting of the scene, and I really wish I could decipher this sentence, but alas, I cannot. If anyone else can, definitely slap it down in the comments. Something about the construction in this area, and I do see that some of this section has been redrawn. The edges of this roof and this topmost bit here have been corrected to match the perspective a little better, and it looks like the paper has been taped together to allow for such a tall illustration. The skeleton at the bottom has also been corrected a fair bit, adding more detail to the arms and legs, and the red glow projected from the runes onto the bones, likely done in compositing, really brings life to it. Literally. It's unclear if this hilariously frantic cut of Chilchuck is Kano, his mentor Kai Ikarashi, or some other animator emulating their styles, but because Kano is clearly behind these next ones, Marcille's face shape looks remarkably similar to how it looked back here in episode 8, it seems likely that he did this entire sequence, minus that first shot. There's so much in this scene to discuss, but we're finally back to what made me start talking about it in the first place. I love the way Kano uses the character's hair to convey their energy and emotions. He did it with Senshi in last episode with this crazy dynamic cut, but it feels even better thematically here. In these 3 cuts, Marcille's hair takes on a life of its own and dominates the composition. It flows across the screen like a raging river in this 12-frame loop, and grows more and more supernatural in appearance as it twists and flaps up into the air in this 9-frame loop, forming these crazy unnatural shapes that almost look like flames rather than strands of hair. And when it finally settles down, it forms long ribbons that float downwards, starting with the scalp and eventually flowing away at the ends like water draining from a basin. Is that too many metaphors? Marcille's hair really becomes a living embodiment of her own spirit and magical energy, and by the time the spell is over, it's as if it's grown to an almost unnatural length, stretched to its limits, and when she collapses on the ground it looks tangled, jagged, and frayed at the ends, completely spent. And all of that is without even getting into what is obviously the most striking single shot of the episode, possibly the entire show so far, and the one that I was most looking forward to. They forego these panels of the dragon's blood flowing to the hands and chest of the skeleton and focus entirely on the skull, which has been a focal point the entire time. Blood pools around the skull, first forming the rough shapes of muscles, then the skin on top. It's really strange to watch the skull's unsettlingly realistic individual teeth morph into this more cartoony, simplified, single shape. I'd like to award some extra points for showing the blood pool inside the skull and form the tongue and eyeballs before the eyelids and lips form and cover them, and the way the ear and nose sort of twist into place with excess blood pouring from them. Great job, Kano. You really get a good grade in making me want to crawl out of my own skin. These two are such good friends. This scene allows the manga to speak for itself and follows it very closely, and it, along with the rest of the episode, is of course very cute and a well-deserved breather. But it all still lies on top of the unmistakable feeling that something about what just happened feels very wrong, and Marcille seems eager to gloss over it. The anime skips over a few panels of world building here, so I'll fill you in. Laios finds it strange that they found such a fancy bathhouse in a city built over 1,000 years ago, and Chilchuck explains that according to legend it was built with dwarven and elvish technology, and humans back then might have been even more advanced than they are today. Marcille has been shown to have been brought up sheltered and a little prejudiced, even racist you could say, which she was forced to confront in the orc episode, so it'd be reasonable to assume that this is another example of that.
Who are you calling a dark elf?
But as manga author Ryoko Kui explains in this little side illustration, there's actually no such thing as a dark elf in this universe. It's just a misconception that stemmed from the elves' colonialist practices that have shaped the modern global society. If you want to read it, I'll link it in the description. It's kind of interesting. This quick joke doesn't really work when spoken out loud. Fallen is a bit confused by Senshi's name and refers to him using the kanji for warrior, which is pronounced Senshi, instead of just the katakana like everyone else does. We've of course got time for some of the most egregious anime original fan service yet, which was originally cowardly covered by his kilt? This is a bit confusing. Chilchuck, restrained by Laios, shouts that Senshi is being wasteful with the dragon's tail. This was originally referencing an earlier conversation that was also cut from that same scene in the bathhouse. After saying that they're still broke, Chilchuck says that the dragon parts are valuable and suggests that they bring them back to the surface to sell. They get a lot of mileage out of these numerous glistening food illustrations from Mao Momiji this episode, and I love the music cutting out after Laios' triumphant declaration that dragon meat tastes like dragon meat. Senshi's just happy to be here. Surprise! They're both just like that. Laios finally has someone to brag to again, who's just as excited as he is, and he really takes the opportunity. It's nice to see that he doesn't feel so isolated anymore. They've added this silly little fisticuffs motion before Kensuke retreats into the sword, and it's too bad they didn't adapt this little gag panel of Laios grossing everyone out walking around with a rotting sword. This is a cool choice to use the reflection in the blade to break up the visuals of this fairly long dialogue scene and reflect Laios reflecting on his own actions. Wait, they kept the frog suit?
Do you want to eat it?
Yes, please, I'd love that.
What? After the little fisticuffs thing? I love how uncontrollably giddy Marcille and Laios both are to have fallen back. And after everything they've gone through to get here, it really is cathartic. Wait, who is the little elf bastard from the paintings? It's kind of funny that more got cut from this episode than from the previous one, which managed to fit 3 whole chapters in with minimal cuts. But that just goes to show how much more time dialogue-heavy pages take than action-heavy ones. It's also clear that this was a deliberate choice to slow down the pacing and let these moments breathe, which was a welcome change from the breakneck pace of the last few. Held together by one huge moment of striking visual style and animation quality, this episode rightfully returned to the low-key direct adaptation style as the party takes some time to reform. That classic feeling of unplaceable dread is still there though, like they've done something against nature. Well, see you next time, and subscribe if you want to catch my next breakdown. Thanks for watching.